Thank you. Nice to be with you.
And Dr. Paul, let us say we deeply appreciate your service in the U.S. military and for giving us the opportunity to even have an election today. I did want to ask you, this is Bubba here, and it's great to have you on the show. We wanted to ask you about the economy, and we know the economy is not what it needs to be, and I know that you're very big into the economic side of this. If you're sworn in president, what do you do? What's the first steps you do to get the economy back on the trail?
Of course, there's a lot of first steps you can do, but you have to recognize that this thing has been messed up for a lot of years. It has a lot to do with the Federal Reserve and monetary policy, the excessive debt, and all the malinvestment, which is very structural. But the first thing you have to do is recognize how the problem came about, and what you have to do, you have to get rid of the debt. Liquidation of debt is key. If you or I were deeply in debt, we couldn't have our own household economic growth unless we got rid of the debt because the debt burden is so great, which means you can't bail out people anymore. You have to stop all the bailouts, and that debt needs to be wiped off the books, not given to the people. So if you give it to the people, the middle class gets smaller, and they print up the money, and it causes the inflation. So I think the most important thing you can do is cut spending. The other candidates have not talked about real cuts in spending. Nobody in Washington cuts about it. They talk about nibbling away at a $10 trillion proposed increase in baseline budgeting over the next 10 years. So if they cut $1 trillion out of $10 trillion, they still increase it by $9 trillion. I want to cut $1 trillion out of the first year to make the point that spending is the problem, and this money should be returned to the people. The people should be spending the money. So the cut in spending is the most crucial thing. And, of course, I think the easiest place to cut is overseas spending. Why should we be spending these hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars overseas at the same time that people are suffering here at home? So I would work on the spending, but you can't do that in one day. It's setting the standard. It is setting the atmosphere to talk about the real problems. The problems is government's too big. You have to cut the spending, and you have to quit the bailouts.
Congressman, talk to us about Obamacare. If it is implemented, will that be the drag on the economy that many of the Republican candidates are saying that it is? And is it even legal?
Well, it's not legal, but prescription drug programs are not legal either.
Right, I agree.
So we've been all involved in this for a long time. No, there's no authority for the government to be running medical care. Yes, it's a big burden. But think back, even back to the Depression, we got into trouble, and they created a lot of new regulations in the 30s and delayed the recovery from the Depression. When Enron went bankrupt, we gave the economy Sarbanes-Oxley. The Republicans did that. That added $1 trillion of cost to the economy. Now we have Dodd-Frank. That's another $1 trillion. Now they want to put on Obamacare. Fortunately, the Republicans are speaking out pretty strongly against it. But just think of their record. They should have prevented this in the past. They shouldn't be the participants in it. But obviously, we have a much better chance on cutting back on Obamacare with the change in the administration. But it is a major problem. There's been too many people in this country, Republicans and Democrats, that believe too strongly in government solutions to our problems, and they have to be more adamant in saying, government really is the problem, and you can't keep spending this money. But I agree with what you were saying, that Obamacare may be the final nail in the coffin of this economy, because and this is one of the reasons why we're not recovering, because of this anticipation of the cost.
Oh, I think the cloud hanging over it is scaring small business owners today.
Oh, we deal with them all the time. They're not going to do anything until they know what this really means.
Yeah, they're holding, they're kind of squatting, if you will. Congressman, kind of following up on that, I like a lot of the things that you say, but you're trailing in this election. Why do you think you're behind, and what do you need to do to bring you to the front of the pack?
Well, I have to convince the Republican primary voters that they should be voting for less government, since I'm the only one that's advocating less government. So my toughest place to convince people of less government is in the Republican primary, because they like government. When it comes to, say, the Patriot Act, the invasion of our houses, the TSA, this is strongly supported by Republicans, and they would not consider stopping foreign aid in at all. So, but my support, when I get these crowds out, they're always 2 or 3 or 4 times bigger better than anybody else. We can get 4,000 or 5,000 people, especially on the campuses. But they're independents. They're people who aren't registered Republicans. They're Democrats, and so the support. So you test my name against Obama, I do better many times than the rest of them. So my appeal is much more than Republican base. And you say, well, that's terrible. You're not a good Republican then. Yeah, but you have to win. You can't win with a hardcore authoritarian type Republican base and say, oh, this is what we need, somebody that will, keep government going when we really need government. That won't work. So I think that is what happens, the support. Everybody knows the tremendous support that I get from the generation that's coming into fold now, and yet at the same time it doesn't translate into the votes. But it is changing. We're doing very well on delegate count. We do better there than just on the votes. Sometimes they get mixed up on counting the votes. All of a sudden we have a victory, then it's snatched away. Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on. But the enthusiasm for what we're doing, the necessity for this, is obviously recognized by the students and also the military. That's where one of the strongest support. I get more money from the military than all the rest of them put together. I'm the only veteran in the race. So my foreign policy and this position on the wars and the fighting and spending overseas very well received. But it really challenges the Republican base. So I think we should listen to our military.
We've got about a minute and a half, but I know that's probably not fair, but you can maybe be straightforward about this. Speaking of your foreign policy, where do you stand on Israel?
Well, I think Israel should be our best friend, and we should take care of them by us minding our own business and not telling them what to do. Israel was, when it was started, they wanted independence and self-reliance. They deserve it. They can't do anything without permission from us. I defended Israel when they took a nuclear site in Iraq, in the 1980s. Right. They have 300 nuclear weapons, and we cannot be intimidated to think that we have to send more money and troops into Iran because Iran doesn't even have a nuclear weapon, and they have no capability nor desire to commit suicide. And so this whole idea of war propaganda that we have to go into Syria and into Iran, that is no more logical than us going into Iraq when there were no weapons of mass destruction, no al-Qaeda, and think of the losses that we have here in fighting this war in Afghanistan. Makes no sense. 10 years and total chaos over there, and we're totally bankrupt. So no, I think Israel would be better off. We stopped all the foreign aid. We'd stop all the foreign aid to their neighbors and their enemies. They get 7 times more than Israel gets.
So you don't think Iran is any threat to Israel?
Well, they are, and I certainly don't want them to get a nuclear weapon, but they're not the threat to people. All you have to do is listen to Meir Dagan, who ran the Mossad. I mean, he's on the radio all the time saying, let's not do this. This doesn't make any sense. And there's quite a good discussion going on in Israel how foolish it would be to take on Iran. So, yeah, we contained the Soviets. They had 30,000 nuclear weapons.
Dr. Ron Paul, we're wrapping up, going to the break. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Congressman.
We'll be right back.
Rick and Bubba.
All right, Ron Paul Robert needs to call us right now because, look, we've had Ron Paul on. Now,
we've had all 4 candidates on now.
Right, everybody.
We're gonna hear from some of them again, but Ron Paul Robert is our.
I don't know. We don't have one. Here's the thing on this.
Somebody's left the wheel.
Here's the thing on this, because I know how these things work. It happened when we had the Romney interview. You got to understand before we get on the Ron Paul websites again. He was told in the break that it was a hard network break. And I even told him before we asked the question, hey, you got about a minute and a half. So please, Ron Paul people, we didn't cut Ron Paul off. That we were trying to get
same hard break that Romney had Friday,
and we even tried to get him into the studio, and his schedule didn't work, and tried to get. That's all the time that we were given from his camp. That's the only time he could be on, and we told, just like we did with Romney, we told him we got a hard break, and those you said we ambushed Romney and all that. No, we didn't. His people,
and they've all been invited to come in the studio and run the 40.
Right. So Ron Paul Robert, I'd like Ron Paul.